There is a weariness of the body which is our common lot because of the fevered character of the daily round, and it is good to sit together in the sanctuary and give rest to the body. There is a weariness of mind due to the wide variety of tensions which engage it, tensions which express themselves in ambivalences and contradictions and paradoxes. It is good to have a moment when all of these are suspended and the mind waits for a new dimension of alertness and synthesis. There is a weariness of the world. The kind of exhaustion that comes from the contemplation of needs that are so vast that the mind cannot encompass, from the awareness of distresses, the heights and depths of which stagger the imagination, the overriding quality of despair that seems to provide the subtle overtone to all the tidings that sweep into us from the ends of the earth. It is good, so very good, to pause and spread out before the altar the vast reaches of the weariness of the world. There is the weariness of the spirit. Made up in part of hunger, in part of guilt and sin and error, in part of anxiety, in part of love and hate. And how good it is to bring into our churning spirits the moment of quiet, when perchance, our Father, it will pleasure thy Spirit to breathe into us thy great tranquility, that we may know each after the pattern of his own need and hunger and desperation what it is that is needful for his peace. And for this privilege, this fleeting, subtle, creative moment of thy grace, we give thee thanks. We give thee thanks. We give thee thanks, O God. O God, our Father. As a background for a continuation of our thought about freedom and failure, a thought which was touched upon in our last time together when we were focusing our minds upon certain of the timeless insights in the tradition which is ours. Will you listen to these two poems, one with which you're familiar, no doubt, written many years ago by a man who was serving a lifetime sentence in the Charlestown prison in this state, and the other from a contemporary. Life, you have beaten me. Still with stinging wounds I kiss your hands. Though you have tortured me until my joy was crushed, my hopes, my will for things I do not understand, though I have trembled at your power and wept in terror hour by hour, for all our struggling, hate, and strife, I love you, life. Though what I build you will destroy, though you have snatched joy after joy from my weak hands, and though you break my heart and all my dreams dispel and silence every drum and fife that makes my march less terrible, I love you, life. And life, for all your cruel powers, for all your proud brutality, how wonderful the few brief hours when you are kind to me. And the other, though I'm beaten, nobody shall know. I'll wear defeat so proudly I shall go about my business as I did before. Only when I have safely closed the door against you and the rest shall I be free to bow my head when there is none to see. Tonight, I'll shed my tears. Tomorrow, when I talk with you, I will be gay again. Though I'm beaten, nobody shall guess, for I will walk as though I knew success. Let us not be depressed. it was suggested that one of the tremendously searching and necessitous words that is symbolic of a timeless insight that moves through the ground of our tradition is the word freedom. And this is no accident. Freedom has a twin, and that twin is failure. In June 1941 or 42, June 1st and 2nd, 1941-42, there was held in Cincinnati a conference, the topic of which, Why Men Fail. It was sponsored by the doctors of the mind and the emotions. They have published, under the editorship of the former editor of the American Medical Association, a volume that gives the papers that were read by the doctors at that time. It's for persons interested in pursuing certain aspects of the whole meaning of human failure. I suggest this book, Why Men Fail, edited by Dr. Fishbein. There is another book on the meaning of human existence by a man whose name is Leslie Paul that has also a very searching chapter on another aspect of the meaning of failure for persons who want to pursue this further in terms of the meaning of human freedom as they experience it, against the background of freedom and its meaning. You will find further reading in this way very rewarding. Now, I begin with the basic insight that the gift of life is at once the gift of failure. The gift of life is at once the gift of failure, for the gift of life is at once the gift of freedom. Man is a very fallible creature. We cannot think of man as being infallible, can we? One of the reasons why I think that life is good rather than evil is the fact that I can always be mistaken. The margin of error, the possibility of error does not ever desert the human predicament. And it is altogether possible that a man may live his entire life confident that at every step of the way he has been right, only to discover just before he dies that a great segment of his life has been a mistake. But because this is true, we don't stop living. Now, things that do not have life don't make mistakes. And sometimes that's why I envy things It's a wonderful thing to know that your pencil, just as a pencil, can't ever make a mistake. Your fountain pen can't ever make a mistake. Your shoes can't ever make a mistake. These inanimate things somehow are blessed without having any meaning. They cannot be significant because they can't fail. Now let this sink into our minds. When failure is an expression or the experience of the internal organism, we say that the person is ill. So illness is a form of failure as far as the internal organism is concerned. So that the doctor through chemistry and through a certain kind of mechanical apparatuses and functioning and one or two other things, seeks to restore the wholeness of function to the organism. And we say he's well if this internal failure has somehow been corrected. But because it is a living thing, it can experience this kind of failure. Now there is another dimension of failure. When the organism is functioning in activity, failure in judgment, failure to exercise the increment of will at a moment when this increment of will was called for and we could not deliver. Failure to act because one was filled with what may be called the absence of courage at the crucial moment. These represent failure of the organism in activity. And always at this level, failure means that the individual has had an opportunity to act in one way or the other. Therefore, implicit in man's experience of failure is his experience of freedom, for freedom means to be able to act one way or the other, but to be under no compulsion to act exclusively in a particular way, for this then would not be freedom. I have told you several times from this pulpit, and I say it again because it's worth it, that the most dramatic illustration that I've had in my own life of what failure and freedom mean in terms of this choice of action, and where there is no choice of action, there is no freedom and therefore no failure. It is the story of the traveling evangelist who came to our community and who preached a sermon about hell, and he was taken on a journey to hell as a visitor, And he was shown around, and in my community at that time, the two great sins, of course, were dancing and card playing. And the persons who went to hell for doing these two things. Now, he was a man of very great insight, for he said that the thing that you had to do forever in hell was the thing, the doing of which brought you to hell in the first place. So that he went first to this great dance hall, and everybody was dancing. That is, couples were dancing, and they had to dance forever and ever, without ever stopping, and with the same partner, forever and ever. And then another place they were playing cards, playing 5 Up, which was the game of my boyhood, and they were seated 4 at a table, and they had to sit there and play cards throughout eternity without ever stopping. Now, they couldn't fail, you see, because they could act only in one way. Freedom then was not something which they could experience, and the absence of freedom was not only slavery, but the absence of freedom in the mind of this inspired man was hell. For it meant that the living texture of the organism had died. It could not act within the feeling context of a living option. Now, there is not only failure when the organism breaks down internally in one way or another, or when there is a breakdown in judgment. But there is another kind of failure which, for lack of a better term, is a failure that has more of a spiritual quality in it, without seeming to prejudice it at all. It is the failure to do the good thing, the right thing, when you are faced with the option. To look at the good and formally to reject it. The failure that is made up of remorse. Now, if I have a failure in judgment, so that I act with as much knowledge and awareness as I know, but I didn't have enough knowledge and enough awareness. Now, I may be sorry that I didn't do the thing that I should have done, but I'm not loaded with remorse and guilt. This is different. But if I'm confronted with a thing which seems to me to be the right and the decent thing to do, and I exercise an option which sends me in a direction that denies the validity and the integrity of this thing, then my reaction to that kind of failure is remorse, guilt, if I mistreat you, in order that I might pour out upon you the distilled violences of my own spirit, and make of you a victim of my distorted or diseased emotion, then as I contemplate the withering results of this kind of behavior, I feel unclean. It is, if I may illustrate it, it's like the difference between a man who has been killed by what Bill of Ladings call an act of God, a man killed in an earthquake, or a man killed by lightning. When you look at such a man, you feel the sense of the tragic dimension of life. A dimension of powerlessness, of exposure of man to what seems to be the operation of certain impersonal and random elements in existence. But when you look at a man who has been killed by another man, you feel nasty, contaminated, unclean. Now here is the miracle. I wish I knew enough to explain it, but here is the miracle, that there is a dimension of the human spirit that is able to detach itself from the sense of failure that grows out of this third activity, and so to operate upon it that the individual seems to be able to work out some kind of redemption, some kind of reconciliation, so that always, wherever men have experiences of guilt and shame surrounding the experience, moving somewhere within the area of the experience, or sometimes found at the very heartbeat of the experience itself, is something that is positive and creative, that suggests sometimes techniques, methods, ways, moods, attitudes, spirit that will somehow absorb the violence of the guilt. And the individual has the experience that is called the experience of forgiveness. The monitor, oh, that isn't a word. The boundary, no. The context, that's better. The context in which man's experience of failure takes place. Failure and freedom, you see, are these twins. You understand how I'm thinking about it. The context in which it takes place is a context that has one basic assumption, and that is that the ultimate failure for the organism is death. Is death. Is death. And even in the story of Methuselah, finally, even he and death got together. Ultimately, the organism fails in death. But here again is another thing that I don't quite understand. But it is inherent in all of the great religious insights and fundamental to the insight of our own tradition that the human spirit, in the exercise of responsible and significant living, which is living that is fallible, must learn how to take into account the fact of death, so that somewhere within the context of every man's living, his spirit confronts death. Not his body. His body. This is automatic. Not merely his mind. But the dimension of his personality that, for lack of a better term, I will call the time-binding aspect of his personality. This confronts death. This faces death. This takes death into account. This deals with death. And out of this confrontation of the human spirit with that which holds in its hands the guarantor of man's fallibility, arises all of the great moments when the mind and the spirit in synthesis seem to be able to announce to death that it is a little thing. And the dogmas express it in a wide series of doctrines. But what they are saying is that something can happen to the spirit that enables the spirit of man to confront that which guarantees all the fallibility of man, death. So that there emerges then, over and over again, at the level of the most humble human being, and sometimes at the staggering heights of the most learned and sophisticated, a very simple insight that is distilled out of the stuff of deep living, that there are some things in life that are worse than death. Once this is the assurance, the perspective on life falls into place. Now there's one more little step, if I can just take it. It is this quality of the spirit of man that ultimately takes even the fact of death into account, that ultimately deals with failure. for a distinction of insight and of spiritual quality is always made then by such persons between being mistaken, please hear this, between being mistaken on the one hand and failure on the other. That one of the delusions, you see, is to identify failure and being mistaken. And the two things may not be synonymous. A man may fail again and again and again and again. And each failure underscores his sense of fallibility and weakness and impotency, yet he may not be mistaken in the thing he's trying to do. For always against the failure under such circumstance, something wars, something does battle. And it is this quality in the spirit of man with which he confronts death even that enables man to keep the distinction clear and assuming that it is a valid and a real one, between being mistaken in the thing to which I'm committed and failing to accomplish it. I may fail over and over and over again and get up and start over again, over and over. Heir of the kingdom neath the skies, often he falls, yet falls to rise. Stumbling, bleeding, beaten back, holding still to the upward track, playing his part in creation's plan, God-like in image. This is man. This is man. This is man. And it would not be true if he couldn't fail. For to be free, man must be free really. And to be free really means that he must be conditioned, as it were, to error. And the growth in his spirit is measured by the degree to which he is able to release the quality that is inherent in him that enables him to deal in terms of confrontation with the fact of failure, understood within the insight of man's experience with freedom. And I thank God that this is so. Be very close to us. Our Father, as we stumble and falter and fail, that we may know that these, after all, are expressions of thy love and the depth of thy caring.